Hey friends, so we have spoken about resentment a lot on this channel because, well, it's a really harmful emotion in more ways than one. It goes without saying that it does a number on your mental health, but a lot of people think that it's just mental and doesn't have physical manifestations, but it does. And they're dangerous ones, especially when you carry that resentment around for a long time. Now, there is not one cause that makes people have resentments. It comes from a lot of different scenarios, and it would be impossible to cover that in a video. However, most people's resentment is born from an underlying sense of being mistreated or wronged by another person. This can sometimes start out as just simple frustration or disappointment, and it builds into something overwhelming, becoming deeply ingrained. And next thing you know, it permeates into everything else. It's really that pervasive. When it goes unchecked, you can go from moderately annoyed to having an intense psychotic hatred real fast, too. And it will seem to be for no reason to the people on the outside. It can also lower your self-value too. You can become a little obsessed with how and why you were wronged, and putting that into such sharp focus traps you there into a vicious cycle. It can be really, really hard to get out of that too. There's something I want to get out of the way first, and it's about forgiveness, which is another subject we talk about a lot on this channel. In case this is your first time here, I'm a big fan of it. Not because I'm a doormat or a pushover, but because I feel like it's a healthy way to process unpleasant feelings. I practice forgiving, but not forgetting a lot, because they are two different things. It's something I do for myself because I don't want to carry around the things that they did. I feel like I shouldn't have to. That's unfair. I'm not the one who did it. But yet, I've got that baggage from it. And they don't care about it anymore, so why should I? There's so much freedom in that kind of letting go, friends, that honestly, I feel like there are a few other things that can really give you that. Now that we have established that, can you forgive someone and still resent them? No. Resentment, by definition, is the feeling of holding on and refusing to let go or forgive. So, it's kind of the opposite. I don't think I even realized this myself, to be honest, until I started thinking about situations in my own life where I thought I had forgiven someone, but what they did was such a deep hurt that I found myself getting mad about it again and again. It was still very much actively bothering me, even when I thought I was over it. With some of those things, I did ultimately let go of the resentment, which made me a lot happier, I have to say, and it left me with an interesting end product, a healthy level of indifference. That, for me, is the biggest tell that I am truly over something, that it doesn't have my attention at all, in a good or bad way. Spoiler alert. Next week's video is about this very thing, indifference, so stay tuned. Anyway, there are plenty of times when you will find yourself resentful of something or someone, and it's hard to let go of it because you feel it is justified. And by holding on to it, you may feel like you are maybe punishing that person for what they did, etc. But let me share this, which I had to personally learn. The other person probably doesn't know that that's what you're doing, and if they do know, they probably don't care. So what holding on to that resentment is actually doing is making you feel that hurt over and over again. It's making you feel victimized over and over again, too, for as long as you keep holding on to it. And that's why I advocate so heavily for forgiveness, because why keep doing that to yourself? You know what I mean? Letting go of resentment is a lot of things, liberating and healthy being just two of them. But there are also some things that it is not. It is not making believe everything is fine when it isn't, or condoning or excusing someone's behavior, or forgetting that the whole thing even happened. Those are not realistic expectations, and they do not benefit you. They actually do not benefit anyone. All they do is give the person who did the deed a little bit of a opportunity to dodge accountability for it. So, I know it can be very tempting to want to hold on to resentment, believe me. It makes you feel like you have some kind of control or power. It offers you a kind of a protection or a shield from that person, because if you're mad at them, they can't get to you, if you know what I mean. It lets you feel like you were right and they were wrong. You hope that they notice that you're still upset, so that it provokes guilt in them, etc., and so on. But this is just fooling yourself, to put it bluntly. It doesn't change anything. Not the thing, not the person, not the emotions that you are left feeling. So, now that we talked about resentment at length, you can probably think about some situations in your own life where you have been resentful about something that happened, but sometimes resentment is not that on the nose. It's a little bit disguised. Sometimes you feel feelings that you may not even realize are actually resentments. So we're going to talk about a couple of them, 10 to be exact. Number 1, feeling angry, underappreciated, and unseen often. I made this one first because it's a really common one, and it's one that we can definitely fall into the pits of without even realizing that you're doing it. Now, I'm not talking about just feeling that way in one particular scenario or relationship or job. That usually happens for a specific reason. I'm talking about having those feelings in general, just being angry or dissatisfied and you don't know why, or feeling like nobody appreciates you, nobody sees you, nobody listens. This resentment can come up full force when you suffer from low confidence or poor self-esteem. You feel like you just aren't as good as other people and everyone else is happier, smarter, more interesting, better, etc. Let me just start by saying this. That is not true. Nobody in their life, regardless of what veneer they might put on, has everything 100% in order out here. We are all just figuring it out as we go. Thinking that when you become an adult, that life is just going to magically fall into place and you will always know exactly what to do and exactly what to say is a bigger lie than the check is in the mail, people. Yet, we beat ourselves up all the time over not measuring up to others in various ways, and it's so damaging, especially when it turns into that angry, unappreciated, unseen feeling. Those things are just resentments in a tacky outfit. I'm going to share a quick personal tidbit on this because this used to be me, full disclosure. I felt like I was always grumpy, always mad, nobody paid attention to what I did for them, nobody appreciated it, nobody listened to me, etc., blah, blah. Many, many years ago, I started seeing a therapist to try to figure out why I felt that way. She asked me a question that seemed kind of weird to me at the time, but it really unlocked something for me that helped me to change the state of mind significantly. She asked me, have you ever truly forgiven anyone? I thought about that for a moment, and after going back and forth in the conversation, I realized that the answer was no. I could not say that I actually had. I was still resentful with several people for things that they did, people who I didn't even talk to anymore, no less, that had been out of my life for a long time. Saying that out loud and working through the feelings associated with it really helped me realize that the thing that was making me so angry and miserable was me and my resentments. As I started to process and ultimately let those things go one by one, my mindset shifted and I found myself, again, happier in general and also a lot more confident. My self-worth stock went up. Your mileage may vary, but if you're struggling with those same feelings that I did and you're wondering where you can start fixing that, asking yourself that same question that the therapist asked me might be a good place. Number 2, spending a lot of time thinking about situations where people were mean to you. This is one of those things that I will admit I don't understand why we as human beings do so often, even though I have definitely been very guilty of doing it myself. I mean, if you think about it, when you think about times where people were unkind to you and treated you badly, it doesn't feel good, right? It makes us sad, for lack of a better word. It makes you relive a little of the negative emotions associated with that event. Why the hell would you purposely want to do this to yourself? Yet, many people do it all the time. Perhaps it's because, as humans, we sometimes have a bit of bias towards negative things and tend to gravitate towards them more. So then we do the positive, I guess. But doing a post-game analysis on that painful event is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it really does help dull its edge and make it easier to process. It helps us to gain emotional acceptance, which is really important. But there's a fine line there too between thinking about it and trying to understand and overcome it, and just chronically ruminating over the situation. That is actually a counterproductive action, and it can lead to episodes of just anxious, nervous feelings that are icky and resentful. So, I think the best way to say this is probably also the simplest. Let that shit go. 3, always making jabs, even subtle ones, and passive-aggressive comments at others. Passive aggression is indefinitely fascinating to me, or infinitely fascinating to me, actually. Maybe because I tend to be a very literal person. If I have something to say, I'm just going to say it, and when people say things to me, I generally take it at face value, and I assume that they mean what they said, unless, something else shows me otherwise. So, in other words, I don't really get that, but I have definitely known a lot of people who act in this manner so often, who always have some kind of jab to make at somebody, everybody, whenever they see an opportunity, that it becomes like part of their personality and 99% of the way that they communicate. It's like everything that they say has this underlying nastiness or contempt, for lack of a better word. Why are people like this? Well, I obviously don't know. There is no one-size-fits-all answer, but I would be willing to bet that it is a good amount of these people, that a good amount of these people are like this, because they are carrying around some kind of resentment. That is textbook resentment behavior. They might be holding on to something that deeply upset them or made them feel small, maybe in the past, and because it's in the past, they cannot control that. So instead, they use what they can control, their words and their behavior now, today, to make themselves feel better or bigger or smarter or whatever. This is true even when the person they are throwing the proverbial daggers at has nothing to do with whatever caused them to feel small anyway. This is one of those reasons that it's so important to deal with your past hurts and traumas, because those emotions, those resentments over the pain that you've felt, can manifest themselves in these ways, in being perceived as an unpleasant, nasty person who is difficult to get along with. Who wants to be thought of that way? I know I don't, nor do I want to spend any significant amount of time around somebody who's like this. So, yeah. Handle your emotional business, friends. It's for everyone's good, including your own. Number 4, constantly criticizing other people. This one kind of goes hand in hand with number 3, but it's perhaps a little bit more moderate. Whenever I see a person who is always critical of other people, never has anything nice or complimentary to say about anyone, always finds fault with everything, do you know what I see? Besides someone who's wildly unpleasant to be around, I see someone who is insecure about themselves and about many aspects of that, who is filled with self-doubt. And their way of dealing with it is by trying to find fault in everything and everyone so they can feel like they are better and smarter. They especially love to do this with people who they see as on a higher plateau in life, maybe more successful or knowledgeable or smarter or whatever than them in some way. In criticizing those people, they are trying to effectively hide their own feelings of inadequacy and bring those people down a level so that they can be the ones who feel superior. These are your stereotypical folks who do not ever clap for others when they win. And as I said in a video a few weeks ago, if you can't clap for others, besides it being a really ugly look, it's never going to be your turn, friends. The funny thing about people like this is that constant criticism is rarely actually about you. It is so much stronger of a reflection about how they actually feel about themselves. Confidence doesn't make a sound. It doesn't need to. Insecurities, they're really, really loud. Know what I mean? Number 5, giving people the silent treatment when you feel they have slighted you in some way. I will go ahead and say it. I absolutely hate the silent treatment. I feel like it's the most basest way to resolve anything 99% of the time. I say 99% because there are some times where there's no more talking to do, no more trying, no more trying to fix things, no more effort, because all that's already been done and it has been for naught. In those cases, remaining silent is actually a power move, because nothing says I'm done with something or someone than just no longer giving them your time. With that said, the silent treatment is otherwise not a way to effectively resolve a damn thing. But you know what is? Communicating. And it's also the mature thing to do. How many times have people gotten upset over a slight or misunderstanding, and instead of clarifying and trying to communicate with the person, they'll just gather up their assumptions and shut the door on that relationship? I'd wager to say that it happens a lot more than you think. Listen, I often say that relationships, whether it be a friendship or anything else, are not complicated, but people are. And that's why communication is key in order to have healthy ones. Communication is clarity. Talk to people about the things that bother you so that they can understand your feelings. Don't make assumptions. Remember that people tend to treat others in ways that reflect what's going on inside of them anyway. So, communicating really helps you figure out what that perceived slight was really about. Know what I mean? 6, blaming others for your feelings. Ah, yes. I hate saying this one too, because I hate this behavior as well. I've said this before, but one more time, just for clarity. Your feelings are your responsibility, period. Nobody can make you feel things. That is on you. And it actually applies to good feelings just as much as it does to bad ones. It may seem natural for us to believe that people can make us feel a certain way because of how they behave, but that is actually false. Sorry. Our brains are not wired to be influenced in that manner. We can only feel what our own experiences, thoughts, and emotions tell us to feel. With that said, surely you've heard people say things like, well, you made me feel this way. You made me do this because of what you said or did, etc., and so on. Since, once again, nobody can actually make you feel anything. You know why people say things like this, right? To push accountability off onto someone else. Probably you. It's a deflection. Resentment is definitely involved in that. It provides the fuel. And interestingly enough, that resentment is usually at least partially directed back at yourself, because most people know full well that their emotions are self-governing, even if they won't admit it. Being resentful at someone else for making you do something, though, is a lot easier than being mad at yourself. Just saying. Number 7, holding a grudge against someone even when they have apologized. I have discussed why grudges are an absolute waste of time on this channel many times. If a grudge was a person, it would probably look like Squidward from SpongeBob. I know I am not alone in my opinion of disliking them, but yet I know plenty of people who hold on to those like Scrooge McDuck hangs on to his bag of coins. I have said this before too, but it's again worth repeating. Holding on to a grudge is like drinking poison yourself and then waiting for that other person to die. So in other words, you're not getting back at them by doing that. You are not making them feel anything. You're not affecting them at all, because that person doesn't sit there dwelling on it anymore, most likely. And especially not if they have apologized. Now, with that said, when someone apologizes, it is up to you to decide if you want to forgive them. And if you do, it's also up to you as to whether or not you want to reconnect with them, which is a completely different thing. It's okay to not forgive. It's also okay not to reconnect. It's okay to say, I accept your apology and I have forgiven you, but I do not want to continue this relationship and move along. For some reason, a lot of people think that forgiving, forgetting, and reconnecting are all steps in a process, that they go together. They do not. They are each their own thing, as we have already talked about. And actually, we made a whole video about this several months ago, which discusses it in depth. I will link it in the description for you. So, let's see. Number 8, overgiving and expecting the same in return. I'm sure you already know that if you do things for other people with solely the expectation that they will do the same or something else for you in return, then you're doing things for the wrong reason. With that said, some people are just givers. It's who they are as a person. And while there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, obviously. I mean, I'm one myself. When you overgive, you have to keep this idea in mind, that the reward in giving to someone else is never in what you get in return. It is always in being able to do it in the first place. Now, there are people who are just ungrateful sacks of dog poop, no matter what you give or don't give. And when you treat them generously, moving mountains for them, sometimes they will never make a single effort to lift a pebble for you. Are you going to be upset about that and maybe a little resentful? Yeah. This is 1,000% okay and natural to feel, because ungratefulness stings. But you hanging on to that ungratefulness and letting it turn into a lasting resentment is not healthy for you. So sometimes you just have to understand that people are gonna people, no matter how good you are to people. No matter how much you do for them, or give them, or sacrifice for them, there is never a guarantee that they'll do that for you. Hanging on to a resentment over this is not going to change anything or make them suddenly grateful. If you keep this in mind, you'll learn to be a lot more discerning, by the way, and that's with what you give. And that's probably where I should end this one. Number 9, ghosting people when they cross a line, even if you never addressed it. This is similar to the silent treatment, but it's a little bit different. It takes it a little more, it takes a little further. I am admittedly not a fan of ghosting. It's a fairly new term, but the behavior is not, and it's just, I don't know, shitty. I think when you have a relationship with someone, even if it's a brief one, you owe them the respect of an explanation of why you don't really want them in your life anymore. That eliminates crossed wires and speculation, and it clears the air about the reasons why you made the choice, which, by the way, it's a completely fine choice to make. You do not owe anything to anyone, including your presence in their life. With that said, are there times when you have to walk away from someone no matter what? Absolutely, yes. Again, when you have discussed things that hurt you, when you have addressed lines being crossed, and you get maybe an apology, but no changed behavior, or you get no explanation or apology at all, or attempt to make amends. When that happens, bye. When the disrespect was so deep and hurtful that you know you can never trust them again or hold them in any kind of place in your life that has importance, bye. When they know they have hurt you and they seemingly give 0 Fs, continuing about their life without regard for your feelings, bye. when you're dealing with a person who has treated you disrespectfully, even though you have addressed it, again, nothing changes. You know what I'm going to say next. Bye. The point here is those people don't deserve the respect of an explanation when you are no longer going to engage with them. They know what they did. They did it anyway. Even if they won't admit it to anyone, including themselves. But with people who really haven't done anything wrong to you, or they may have maybe slighted you in some way that they might not be aware of, or who perhaps had a bad moment, a bad day, or a momentary lapse in judgment, or people who you are just getting to know and they make a faux pas, which you aren't really sure if it was a mistake or a glimpse into who they really are. Communicate with them. Even if it's just to say, yeah, so I don't think this friendship is going to work. Or whatever it is. It's just a respectful thing to do. And I think that that's really all we need to say about that one too. And number 10, continuing to dwell on things that you insist you are over already. You know, this is a tough one because healing is not linear. When something happens and, like we talked about earlier, you think you're over it and it's not in your everyday thinking anymore, and then one day you're just out here minding your business and blam, here it comes again. You can naturally feel like you've taken a step backwards. This is what I mean when I'm talking about things like healing and grief and things like that not being linear. So with that said, when you commit to being over something, then you really can't continue to dwell on it. You have to let it go. If you're still dwelling on it and you're still harboring a resentment over it, you're not really over it. And look, it is perfectly okay not to be. It doesn't matter if it happened 5 minutes ago or 15 years ago. If you aren't over it, you aren't over it. However, once again, continuing to dwell on it is really not going to help you. And it's not going to help you get over it either. And yes, there is a big difference between that dwelling or ruminating and processing your emotions. Rumination just involves recycling the same thoughts over and over without actually coming to any conclusions. It always ends in resentment, by the way. And sometimes a lot more than that. While, on the other hand, processing thoughts and emotions involves an active effort to examine them from different perspectives and come up with a solution. When solutions aren't possible, then processing is the path to letting go. It's basically a big sign that says it is what it is and nothing else can be done. And while I really do not love it is what it is statements, here's the one time where it applies perfectly when it comes to things that happened in the past. There is nothing that you can do to change those things. All you can do is accept them and move on. So, if you aren't over something, that's okay. There's no timeline in the process. Take your time and process the emotions with that associated with that event until you are. But don't trick yourself into thinking you're over it if you aren't, because that is for sure going to cause some frustration and resentment when you discover that, I thought I was a lot further in this process than I actually am. You can definitely get to the point where you really are done with dwelling and the situation and the person and everything else. But that timeline is, again, up to you. And along the way, you have to remember to keep in your self-care and give yourself lots of grace and practice what I believe to be one of the best ways to heal from something traumatic or painful. Forgive yourself. Do that first, before forgiving anyone else. Trust me on this one. So, there you have it. 10 things that you may not have realized are resentments, but definitely look, smell, and sound like one. Friends, resentment is basically a message that you need to speak up for yourself, that you need to set boundaries with people, that you need to work on healing from the past so that it doesn't hijack your future. And while it's perfectly fine and normal to harbor it for people who have done you dirty, you have to eventually make the decision to let it go and free yourself. Otherwise, you're going to continue to be burdened by it. And you run the risk of letting it seep into everything else that you do and all your relationships as well. I won't lie to you. It's one of the most difficult emotions, in my opinion, to let go of. Once it's in there, it's in there. And you can even begin to expect it in other things and relationships with other people before anything even close to it happens. When you make a commitment to release it, though, when you start to forgive and heal and truly move on, you will notice the difference. Trust me on this one too. It's one of the best things you can do for your growth, your relationships with others, and for yourself, period. That's all I've got for you this week. I'll be back next week with another priority message. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Bye.